All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CO channel, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I could tell you what we just had off screen because it's not as intertwined with what this video is going to be. But I'm telling you, you are going to be blown away by this gentleman coming on, Owais Qureshi, the visual cue, and Go for CO community. You know, I'm trying to always get the best of that middle market sense, right? Zero to 50, $100 million companies. You know, these CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, we tell the story of how they're doing it, why they're doing it, what the operations, the marketing, the sales, the scales, and all that type of stuff. And you get to learn from these, good CEOs in fundamental businesses around the world. So, Oace, thank you so much joining us from Houston, Texas. How are you?
I'm doing good. John, thanks for having me. And man, that introduction now, I got to make sure I follow through.
Well, hey man, I try to vet out, right? And I don't have everybody, but I feel like I want to get everybody here because from a startup business that I've had, people with ideation scenarios to people that are doing several millions of dollars in business. It's really cool just to hear and from your background, especially offline that we were just talking about, man, it's super cool to have you on. So our community really engages when they hear about like what is it that he thought of, like what was the ideation part of the visual cue. How did he get influenced to start this business? Did he come from a corporate background? Did he go from school right into ownership? All those types of things. And
Yeah,
I've told my story many times of being a college student to then starting a business to then being in telecom, automotive, and finance. But so that's what kind of we want to start off with. So give us a little bit of the background, Oasis,
yeah,
and
sure.
go from there. So take it away.
Sure. So, short story, again, I'm a first generation immigrant, third generation business owner.
Mm.
And my family and my parents brought my brother and I here back in 1990, I believe. So we came here from Pakistan, and very similar stories that you hear from immigrants, come from nothing. And both of my parents were working in various places, and then decided to go out on their own. First it was my dad that decided to open up his own businesses, and then my mom followed suit a couple of years after him. And the interesting thing there is that typically you'll see immigrant husband and wife both just going and saying, okay, well, let's go start a laundromat, or let's go start a convenience store, and let's work together. Where my parents, they said, okay, well, we're still going to be business partners. However, you focus on your industry and you focus on your industry. And my mom had two different locations and insurance companies. My dad expanded from convenience stores to hotels, and it was just they just kind of continued as business partners, but completely different industry. So that was really interesting, and I was being prepared, so to speak, for the rest of my life for a healthcare career, right?
Mm.
It just and I'll just let everyone else use their imagination. I mean, in terms of like where the origin is from, and typically what do you see when it comes to us pursuing healthcare, right? There's only three professions that are that we're reserved for, so to speak, from an expectation standpoint. Whether it be our parents, whether it be our community, it's either you're going to be a doctor, either you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an engineer. After that, what is it that you do? I don't understand. I've already tuned out. So that's the nature of our community. And look, I mean, setting high standards, great. And so that was the career path that I was headed towards, and decided that that's not right for me. And of course, you also start noticing the changes that are happening in healthcare around that same time. I'm talking about probably a decade and a half ago now. But you start seeing how healthcare is evolving, and how that's impacting not just the medical professions, but also on the patient side, right? and what that means from, because I always envisioned myself as, okay, well, great, finish med school, become a doctor, practice under someone else for a couple of years, and then have my own practice. It was never go and become a hospitalist. It was never about going and working underneath someone at someone else's private practice. It was, I'm going to have my own practice, maybe a couple of them, and that's, I lived the life of an entrepreneur, so to speak, in terms of being able to call the shots. However, and this is by no means a way to, because I have a lot of friends that are physicians. I have a lot of friends that, and I have several clients who are physicians as well. So this is by no means a way to undermine that, but do you really call the shots? Or is someone else calling the shots for you? And so when you go back to the overall immigrant experience and what America means to me, and how I define America is you being able to determine your own outcomes on your terms, not on someone else's terms. And that's the defining moment when I came to that realization. And I wasn't able to articulate it as well as I can articulate it today, but that's how I define business. That's how I define people being able to, or wanting to go into business with them, that it's that little trigger. Perhaps that's not even present at the beginning, or for some of them it is, right? Every time I speak to my grandmother, she's in her 90s now, has dementia. This is how she recognizes me, John. She can no longer remember my name, but every time I get on FaceTime with her, she'll smile and she'll tell me, she'll go back to a memory and she'll recall something. Someone with dementia recalls one memory to put it a name, to put it with a face, and that's, no one can tell you what to do. So the entrepreneurial spirit was, I'm hardwired for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Excuse me one moment.
No, that's amazing, man. So, look, I think it's a good segue. Having a grandma and having the foundation of your two parents and all the things that they did, right, is pretty darn cool to be able to share an understanding, right? I mean, hardwiring, all of us go through struggles and things and highs and lows and all that type of stuff. But, it kind of made me think of my uncle, who's the last surviving person out of my mom and the other uncle, and he's in his late 80s. And it's interesting. I have a similar experience where he had a stroke, so he can't speak very well. But when we do WhatsApp, it's like his face lights up, right? I'm his nephew of his
Wow.
only sister, and I'm an only child, so I'm the only nephew on my mom's side, obviously. But it's such a cool experience, and he owned many businesses and many big businesses in Colombia, South America. So what a cool experience, man. So obviously, foundationally speaking, we all have a story. It's so cool that you recognize that the hard wire was, even if you went to the medical space, you were going to desire to be an entrepreneur within that medical space.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've taken a little bit left turn, right? Going into advertising, marketing, and branding, and the things that are so cool that you do. So give us a little bit of glimpse on that side. Obviously, the visual cue is a really cool name, by the way. It makes you think right away. So it really kind of lends to what you do on a daily basis for businesses across the world. So give us a little bit of an understanding of how you got that started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just decided to come out of that, and uh, I was I was always, for whatever reason, I started off very humble beginnings. I started off as the designer, as the copywriter, as the coder, all of those components. And this was long before I even started the company. It was in between semesters, I was picking up very small jobs, not realizing that I was actually building up a portfolio. But I had a knack for design. I learned everything myself, and it was just more of, okay, I just see things a certain way. there needs to be brand consistency. And I saw that there was a disparity of that and a gap there for so many small businesses at the time that I was like, okay, well, let me just approach this person and see if they want to do this.
Mm.
And it was just, $1,000, $1,500 that I was now able to pocket as a broke student to say, okay, well, look, I'm not going to burden my parents with additional money, or I'm not going to take out a loan to be able to fund some sort of basic needs that I have to be able to make sure that I'm not financially burdening myself. Well, that need was actually on the back end building up this small little portfolio that was really attractive and driving in interest from other companies, other businesses. I didn't realize that.
Mm.
I didn't realize that at all. And once I decided to come out and say, once I decided to, part ways from my other path and move towards advertising, I said, let's leverage this. And for probably a good 6 years, John, uh, you started to see this emergence of practically everyone with a laptop was now coming in and saying, "Hey, I'm a marketer. Hey, I can do this. Hey, I can do that," and not necessarily delivering to the standards of what I was delivering at. And this is not in any way to inflate my own ego, but I just, again, I saw it a certain way, and I see it even today. I see it a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure that people, again, if I look at it now, I'm like, okay, well, look, my parents put their blood, sweat, and tears into their business. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into their business, and I believe that business owners in general put their blood, sweat, and tears into their business. So when they invest into a certain specific thing, you you have it's incumbent upon you as a vendor to make sure that you deliver on that standard, that you make sure that what you deliver and the standard with which you deliver it is proportional, if not more, it exceeds the proportion of what they've invested into it. And so that's how I saw it. And I said, okay, well, if just about anyone else with a laptop can get into this, and now you're saturating the marketplace, you're commoditizing what we do. And I struggled with that for 6 years. I struggled with that. So if from 2013 to 2019, I struggled with that, and I said, man, I'm getting beat up on price. I'm getting passed up in favor of other companies. Maybe some of them are smaller. What's happening here? So there was a huge sort of there was uh, a anyways, it was a very long, drawn out sort of a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
However, John, when it comes to the visual cue, when you ask me that, when it like, how did that origin? What's the origin of that name? Well, cue in itself, if you think about it, is a signal. It's a signal that makes people react. It's a signal that gets people to act, and it's also it also spells out my last initial. So I wanted there to be a double meaning. I wanted it to be representative of my family, while also signaling, right? It's a signal while also saying that, hey, this is how we see the world of branding and marketing, because it's about the hearts and minds. It's about influencing people. It's about making sure that you figure out exactly what drives someone to make a buying decision. So Q essentially had all of that integrated into that. And like I said, I mean, so the way that I defined it, then it was like, okay, well, branding provokes, marketing promotes. We are
Mm-hmm.
branders first, marketers second. Whereas most of our competition that were just flooding the market space, not really thinking about it, they were marketers first, branders maybe.
Interesting.
So
Wow. You know,
branding provokes, marketing promotes.
that's a deep thought. I don't think on any of my podcasts we've actually gone this deep on the significance of the name. So let's go a little bit deeper on that. I mean, so you take visual, you take Q. Does Q, I know it represents also the Q of your last name, but does it have an acronym behind it by chance? I didn't know that
No
off.
acronym, no
Okay.
acronym.
So not CUE of anything. Okay. So interesting, right? And the way you developed yourself and struggled through those 6 years, right? It's really interesting to go a little bit deeper on then, how you formulated that name to be the way that comes out to your clients, which then in respect with all the things that you've done for, right, the work that you've done, integrates with the clients that you have. So tell us a little
Certainly.
bit more about that. I mean, and go a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah. So, again, initially it was we were just picking up what we can get,
Hmm.
and attracting, and then of course over time, as we were able to pick up the portfolio that we or develop the portfolio that we wanted, uh, I started becoming a bit more specialized in terms of what we can bring to the table, and then also started thinking about why are these companies wanting to work with us, right? That was that sort of a 6 7 year mark where I started to, of course, mentorship was a big deal. I started getting mentored by the right people. I got myself involved into peer advisory boards. I got myself involved in getting an industry specific coach to really figure out exactly how how to come in and of course, make sure that we are essentially providing some sort of a strategic advantage. It's a strategic advantage for our clients to work with us, right?
Hmm.
So how can we create that for our clients? And what I found, John, is first of all, let's start looking at it as an inflection point in their business. There's something happening through the lifespan of their entire business ownership that requires for them to continue to stay competitive in the marketplace so that they do not become obsolete over the course of the next couple of years, right? And so how can we come in and uniquely help them through each one of those stages? Now think about that. Let's say you have a company that's now in the growth stage. What typically happens in the growth stage? They're either bringing on employees.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're also having employee troubles, right? We see that happening in the marketplace right now, right? So you have employees coming in, you're having employees leaving. How do you solve that problem? Well, essentially for us, it's like, okay, well, you create a buy-in. That's a stakeholder that requires a buy-in. That's a stakeholder that clearly requires for you to be able to sell them something. It's a position that you're selling to them.
Hmm.
How do you win them over their hearts and minds? It's the same thing when you're going into a new market and you have zero visibility. You have zero awareness in terms of your brand, right? So zero familiarity. Well, how do you create that familiarity? First of all, figure out exactly who it is that you're wanting to target. Second, uh, what informs their buying decision? What gets them to buy? Why should they be looking at you compared to many of the other ones that have been around for much longer in that market? So, uh, questions that need to be answered prior to that. So again, that's the thought process. Help me, again, tell me if that's the direction that you're wanting to go in for
Oh
this.
yeah. I mean, look, I think seamlessly are going into the client journey side of things of
Okay.
how you have the visual cue. I mean, I was super interested and I love hearing it about the visual cue, right? And the perspective of it.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes as entrepreneurs, we can probably put too much time into a name and does it look pretty and like go out and freaking do it. Let's go. Come on, get the action like you did, right? You got one client, then you're like, wait, I got another client, and then you went
Yeah.
6 years and you saw this flood of people coming in, so that there's competition. Now you have to adjust to that, and how do I pivot and stuff? But to have such a distinct name allowed you then to also put that journey of the client in this rhythmic, situation. So it's pretty cool. So tell us now, all right, what is your current system of client, coming into the visual queue? Do you have certain departments that handle certain things? Are you kind of the face up front? with a discovery type call? What are some of the systems that you implement?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I continue to stay in front of the clients and make sure that at the very beginning, especially, I'm the one that's essentially involved. So when it comes to, of course, the marketing aspect of or promotional aspect of the visual cue, again, just like many of the other companies, you want to make sure that you're no longer a faceless brand. That's a big deal. We impart that onto our clients as well, right? So obviously, you got to walk the walk before before you start expecting your clients to actually follow through as well. So from that angle, John, long before you have clients come on board, I'm out there. What does that do? If you think about it, I go in and say, okay, well, look, not every client is the right client. But it's also incumbent upon me to ensure that I'm presenting the visual cue and presenting myself in a way that that gets the right client to look at me and the wrong client to look the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then once I actually have a conversation with them and say, okay, well, look, this is our 30 or 60-minute sort of initial consult to essentially figure out whether we're going to be the right fit. During that time is also another way for us to figure out, are we going to like each other? This is this is not a one-off engagement. This is going to be a long-term engagement. And even if it is a one-off engagement, well, that one-off engagement might last us about 6 to 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty long time. We've got to be able to like each other, or else we're gonna, right. So and am I willing to put my name on the line for someone and my reputation on the line for someone that is not going to be a good fit, but is about to cut a check to me, primarily because our work looks so attractive to them? It's like, hey, money is not of the essence, which would be a great, that would be a great situation to have, but we just don't align from a value perspective. We just don't align from a work ethic perspective, whatever that looks like, from an accountability perspective. And so that to me is a significant portion of qualification in terms of, are you going to be the right fit for my company? So because that can flood over into the rest of my clients, and then now again, it's it becomes a reputation issue. So now, once they are on board, that initial piece, the workshopping, which can last for anywhere from 8 to 16 hours over the course of different sessions, is fairly involved, fairly intense, and I'm essentially the one that's running that initial piece. What
Mm-hmm.
that does is, of course, again, the unique marker here is the types of questions that I ask, the questions, and I can't say that just kind of came to me out of nowhere, right? It's through a very, very rigorous sort of coaching, training, peer advisory sort of training as well, that I've gone through, that I put myself through. And then, of course, falling on my face on numerous occasions, right? Making mistakes on numerous occasions to be able to say, okay, well, look, let's go back and debrief on this to figure out exactly how we can laser focus these types of sessions to make sure that this is of value to the client, and this is, again, that strategic advantage for the client to help them continue to stay competitive in a marketplace that can potentially threaten their existence over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So once we think and help them think about their brand, that's when now we have all of these things that now we know exactly what it represents. We know what drives their customers, all of those components that I've helped them think about, put that into messaging. Then we bring in our copywriters and get all of that put into play. Then we have our designers. Notice I haven't said anything about marketing yet.
Mm-hmm.
So strategy, then design, then awareness. That awareness piece is the marketing piece that is at the very end. Most companies and most I would say CEOs, and I'm gonna hold myself to that as well. We are so action oriented, John, You want to jump to the marketing piece.
Hmm.
And here's the analogy that I love to talk about, or I love to mention during my conversation, to just kind of say, okay, well, look, pause for a minute. Pause for a minute. Most of these CEOs that I speak with have some sort of an expensive car either in the driveway or in the garage. And I ask them, hey, what if I was to put a blindfold on you and tell you to gun that car down the street? What are the two likely scenarios? Why, they're going to fall in the ditch, if there is a ditch, or end up in a collision, right? If you even make it that far. Well,
Hmm.
why would you do the same thing with your business? Why would you do the same thing with your company? So the reason why I bring that up, John, is because that typically is what happens is we're wanting to take action. We're wanting to take this immediate action on the marketing side without really thinking about which way to go. And what happens is that now you're wearing blinders when you're doing marketing.
That's
Well,
so
lift
significant.
the yeah,
No, that's super significant on your process of walking someone through that, right? I
yeah,
also picked up on selective, like being selective about who you're working with. Now, certain industries probably bring in the masses, right? In your industry, you can be a little bit more selective. It's really cool that you learned what type of client works best with you, the type of personalities that are at the head of the company, and how they work with you and your
yeah,
team. So that's really cool too.
yeah.
Tell us at what point, because I think a lot of the Go for CEO community is always interested in, in the sales cycle of your business, right? Since you are the brand in front of it as well as the visual cue.
Yeah.
In what part of that is it in the first 90, minutes or so that you're doing that discovery that you then also propose, or do you come back after that evaluation? Because you said it takes 14 to 18 hours or so. I'm assuming, you're not engaging the 14 to 18 hours without getting paid. So, that word of, is it a contract base? Is it a retainer scenario? Like, how does your industry work in that scenario?
Yeah. So the workshops don't begin until we're retained.
Okay.
Because like I said, I mean, you're looking at 12 to or 8 to 16 hours depending on the size of the company, and then of course there's some additional hours that we're putting in on customer surveys and all those components, right? That initial meeting is going to last maximum of 60 minutes. It could end a lot earlier than that. But that initial meeting is, again, it's a fit meeting. It's for us to figure out, like I said, it's for us to figure out, A, do we like each other? B, is there an actual business case here? Is there an actual desired business objective that this particular company is trying to hit? And is there a real pain here? Or is your pain, we're just trying to keep up with the Joneses? Our competitor has a new website and our competitor has a new branding, and we just want to we just want to look the same. Okay, great. It's great that you recognize that. However, how is that translating over into your bottom line? That's
Hmm.
what I want to know, because at the end of our engagement, and of course I continue to follow up with those clients, even if it is a one-off engagement. I'm going to follow up with you in 12 months after that and say, okay, well, the the six-figure investment that you made into this engagement, how has that returned back to you? And how has that influenced your company in a meaningful way, in a tangible, how has that driven tangible value to your company? So that's not up to you to hold me accountable as my client. That's for me to hold you accountable. The reason why is because we want to make sure that you're a success case, because we
Hmm.
want to be able to take that and say, okay, well, look, this is how we did it for John, and this is what John was able to generate out of this. Why don't you come work with us? Would you like similar results?
Hmm.
Right. So let's not skirt around that issue. Let's make sure that that's on top of mind. So again, like I said, during that fit meeting, I'm trying to figure out if this is going to be a great business use case. I'm already thinking, 24 months down the line in terms of how this is going to be meaningful for me, not just that initial check of six-figure value. It's much further than that. And it's the same thing with for that particular client. I want to know what are your 12, 24, 36, 60 month sort of a goal. And if you're sitting there saying, we haven't even figured that out, we haven't thought about it, why are we talking?
You're pressing some buttons that I think as a CEO, right, someone that's leading a company, depending on how big, what other teammates they have in that engagement conversation, it's really neat to hear you're pushing the envelope to look at it from a 12 or 24 or 36-month engagement and executing from there. So really, these times right now of business, always, you mentioned a couple things which I want to kind of circle back to one of them, which is, as you are internally in your business growing and you meet with these clients, you mentioned, team and staffing and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting for an advertising guy or marketing guy, right, to be able to bring that up. What are some things that you feel that are in the marketplace, and how about the visual cue firm? How have you attracted the right talent, or do you work more on like independent contractor where you bring in kind of almost like a GC type thing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a hybrid. I would call that, again, depending on exactly what the needs are, John. We'll either bring in a contractor to help support our efforts, and then of course, we have actual employees that are full time. Um, Here is how I would essentially describe the way that I attract talent.
Hmm.
And I'll share a story with you about a couple of years ago. 2019 was a really interesting year, John. And when I say that, it was a very challenging one. It was a year where I was scaling. I had doubled my revenue the year before, and felt extremely confident and perhaps a little overconfident. I said, you know what? Okay, well, let's invest back into the business. And I invested about 75% of my returns from the year before
Hmm.
back into the business, primarily by bringing people on board. And I said, hey, yeah, let's scale this. This is great. It's going to be an exciting year. We're probably going to double what we did because we're doubling our manpower, and didn't really pan out that way. And I'm going to take accountability. I'll take full accountability on that. So in hindsight, I'm going to say accountability starts at the top is my favorite motto, primarily because if I'm not modeling the behavior that I want out of my employees, then why should I expect them to follow through? So when you look at core values, replace core values with expected behavior.
Hmm.
So, anyways, rewind back to 2019 when I brought these people on board. The first mistake that I made was I was very haphazard in bringing them on board like you said, selective clients, or selectiveness when it comes to your clients, selectiveness when it comes to your employees. Of course, employee engagement translates to client engagement. So you want to make sure that you're bringing on the right type of employees. And I didn't vet them properly. One of them happened to be someone that I mentored, and I said, okay, well, this guy shows so much tremendous amount of potential when it comes to being someone that is a protege. And why not? He's asking me if I have a position open. Why not I offer that? So okay, great. However, the way that he envisioned projecting an image of my company at the time was in direct contrast to what my own core values were, and the way that I wanted to project my company. I don't believe that we should be projecting an inflated image for ourselves nor for our clients. And again, maybe it was the age gap, whatever it was. That was certainly not the strategy that he wanted to inject into the company. And so it took about 8 months, and it was a six-figure loss for me.
Hmm.
In addition to some of the other people that I had brought on board that clearly it was just not a culture match. But out of that loss, and continued reflection in terms of what the visual cue represents for ourselves, for our employees, as well as for our clients, out of all of those hurdles and those mistakes came a clarity in terms of what we wanted for people moving forward. And so today I vet and I tell them, is like, look, one of the main thing is that accountability starts at the top. You always have a you always have an open mic when it comes to holding me responsible.
Hmm.
And so if we fall short of something, I'm going to ask you, it's like, what could I have done differently to make sure that I articulated my expectations to you in a way that is that allowed for you to show up, that allowed for you to succeed in your role. Because if
Makes
you fell short, right, and of course that doesn't mean that I continue to excuse their behavior by holding myself responsible, but I don't also want my employees to think that it's constantly going to be their fault and I'm pointing at them, standing over their shoulders and saying, hey, is this done correctly? To a certain extent, I'm going to say, how can I support you in this? And how can I support you and continue to make sure that I help you succeed in your role?
I really enjoy that. I mean, I think, when you're bringing on talent, as you said, do you form a system of a three interview process? Do you, if it's just you and you're bringing on the talent directly, is there a culture match and where they came from? Do you pluck them out of competitors? Do you find one, that you're just doing business with in general and you enjoy their practices? So it's a really interesting dynamic.
Absolutely.
Now, you brought up, losing a six-figure amount, right? Based on that, action that you had. In a selfish way, I always talk about funding because I'm in that world and in the finance world, and it sounded like you bootstrapped this business at the beginning. You started making good revenues. You started retaining some of those revenues and being able to then implement it into the ways that you branded the visual cue and went to the marketplace. So tell us a little bit about that, side of things for you. Has it been a learning curve to kind of, or do you have a CFO nowadays? Like, how have you handled the growth at the beginning, being kind of more like a college student? Yeah, $1,500 comes in, you can decide what you want to do. But now 15,000, 150,000 comes in. Like, what do you do with that money? And as you said, you invested in 2019, but throughout the process, what have you learned about how you fund your business? What strategic times do you buy certain things? Obviously now you learned some of the staffing model scenarios and what could potentially lose in salaries, but how you I guess allocate those funds is an interesting part to learn.
Certainly. I would say the first one comes from a mindset, John, because I was, again, when you say bootstrap, for many of us that bootstrapped our business, we're so economically or financially conscious of what we're spending on, and I again, not every single personality is this way, but I have a personality. I have two extremes. I'm on two extreme poles. There's never a happy medium. Sometimes it works in my favor, and then there are other times where it works against me. And
Mhm.
so when I was in the mode of being financially or budgetarily conscious of what my expenditures were, I took it to the extreme, to the point where I wasn't investing in my business the way it should be, and
Mhm.
buying tools that should be there to not only streamline our workflow, to create this sort of to enhance our client experience, but then also to augment our capability and help give us that sort of a leeway, that runway to be able to now take off, right? So think about it. I think it was someone that was mentoring me at the time. His company was valued at 150 million. I was sub one at the time, and so just to be in that presence, he's like, "Hey, look, what?" He challenged me with that. He's like, "How much are you investing back into your business?" And I said, "Are you asking me in dollar amount, or are you asking me about percentage?" He was like, "Okay, well, it's just for, I'm going to save you face, and just tell me how much you're investing back in your business." And I said about 10%. He was
Hmm.
like, okay. And then, of course, he didn't want to react to that. And it says, okay, well, 10% is okay. That's fine. Obviously, it doesn't look like you have much overhead at the time. So, what's keeping you from investing the rest? And how is that showing up in terms of your growth? You haven't hired anyone, or you haven't hired that, more people. You haven't invested into various tools. So what do you think the next 5 years are going to look like? So again, things that I ask many of my clients today, he started asking, he asked me, he challenged me with a lot of that. And that's when my eyes opened up. I said, I got to start funding some things here. What are my biggest necessities at the moment? Is it marketing? Is it specific project management tools? Is it other tools that from a production standpoint? Is it subscription towards some other larger what is it some is it subscription for some larger databases,
Hmm.
whether it be image databases, whatever it is, right? So where was I not spending money that needed to be spent on for us to be able to augment our capabilities, for us to be able to go and say, look, we are now positioned to take on a much larger project, a much larger client, and service that client again at a standard that either meets or exceed what they've invested with us.
It's interesting. You take us to a spot where, and on the Go for CEO community, you guys know this. We talk about employee, right, trading hours for dollars, self-employed, which a lot of bootstrapping scenarios start with because maybe you worked at a painting company. Now you're a painter and you're on your
Yeah,
own, and
yeah,
you're this great guy that does this great work. But
yeah.
if you don't invest into this to the other side of the quadrant, which is business owner and investor, and the investor quadrant, it's funny to reinvest into the business so you can get the right talent, the right tools, and things like
Yeah.
that. And now you actually have a business that produces, and you could walk away from it in a sense and still have a business. That's a true business, right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that was probably the biggest sort of a switch in my mind is probably when he asked me is like, how much time are you spending inside your business right now?
mm,
And what could investing in various areas do with the way that you're leading your business? And so when that switch happened, John, it was also a switch of how you treat a line item. If you're treating all your line items as expenses, well, you're gonna look at it as an expense. You're gonna look at it as, okay, this is a subtraction of cash flow, subtraction of money. It's a liability. Every single moment of your business, every single hour, you're gonna start looking at it as a cost. The
mm.
minute that you start treating some of those line items as an investment, the world just opens up.
Yeah, it's a different mindset, and I love that you said it. I think there's a lot to the fact that when you look at those line items as a finance guy, looking at balance sheets and you're looking at inventory flows and you're looking at cash flow and you're looking at forecasting things, right? It's really interesting to kind of understand when the dynamic time of your business is to be able to put those into strategic time. So, or
Absolutely,
opportunity.
absolutely.
So,
And that connects with a little bit with the client selection aspect of it as well,
yeah.
because just I would say probably in the last 24 months I integrated that into my phrasing when we were or my conversations with those clients. Like, look, we believe that what we do is an investment. It's a business investment. You're investing with us. And so if there's ever a time that you start treating this as an expense, we'll have to part ways, and I'll fire you on
Yeah.
the spot.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I actually was thinking about while you were saying some things earlier how you've reversed engineered it so that what works inside your company also works to display to the companies that you're trying to bring on board,
Absolutely.
right? And become clients. So really cool stuff, man. So always, as we wind down the interview here, we always kind of get to the CEO side, right? So client experience, engagement, and operational excellence. Client experience, you've shared some really neat things, kind of the journey of the client, but from a top level value proposition, what makes the visual cue different when you think about client experience?
I'm going to go back to my overall growth experience, particularly in the last probably 5 to 6 years. And what I found is that, first of all, you're never doing this alone, right? If you're doing this alone, you're probably not as effective as you should be. And over time, I had trusted advisors that came along the way, whether it be, again, mentors, whether it be coaches, whether it be actual, my peer advisors from my peer advisory group, Vistage. And what I learned, John, is that they're not just advisors, they are strategic advisors. They're generals that are sitting at my table, preparing me to go to war and helping me stay sharpened for that battle. So where does the visual cue come into the picture? It's the exact same way for a CEO that's listening in right now. You may have a financial general at the table. You may have an operations general at the table. Do you have a branding general that's keeping you sharpened, that's keeping your brand sharpened when you are ready to go out there into battle and go
Sweet.
up head to head against competitors? That's what makes us different. That's what makes me different, because I'm coming into this conversation and saying, how can we do that?
No, that's a unique way to really look at it. And right, again, I lean back to that name, right? It's so significant when you really kind of really, take a second and think about it, right? The visual cue and what you just shared on the client experience. So engagement, obviously, always, you're strong, young, talented, all that type of stuff. Live in a really dynamic city, one of the top 4 or 5 cities in the country. You know, engagement when you're thinking about not only clients but your employees, the vendors you work with, the independent contractors, other connections like myself. Like, what do you think is the value prop of why people engage with you and your company?
Again, the reason why they're engaging with us, first of all, it's always going to be that culture fit is the biggest piece, right? And I'm going to use one of my clients as the example here. When they're an architectural client, and when we started working with them, or long before we started working with them, in many of our conversations, the accountability showed up in many of our conversations. And just the way that that they would show up during the meetings in terms of their conversations, I started to notice that these people go above and beyond for their clients. I asked, again, there's specific questions, that leading questions that I asked along the way is like, okay, well, how do you service your clients? What happens in this scenario? What happens in a scenario if things just don't turn out a certain way? Had nothing to do with how we were going to engage, but I just wanted to know, just to see, again, how they respond to their clients. And that was a great indication for me in terms of how they would respond to us as vendors, and what expectations they would have of us as vendors. It was a big component of that. So very recently, we had to put out a fire for this particular client. And when I noticed that they go above and beyond for their clients, it was incumbent on us for us to go above and beyond for them. And I hope that was clear in terms of, or that I was able to articulate where I was going with that. But again, for us, above and beyond is the big piece of it, is to make sure that we are exceeding expectations. We're not falling below that. And again, the reason why clients continue to come back, it's not the first time, but the reason why clients continue to come back is because we're their advocates. We're not people that just kind of fall off the wayside, non-communicative, or saying, okay, well, look, this is just about the money. It's beyond that. I just, to me, it goes back to my original experience of growing up under entrepreneurs and becoming an entrepreneur myself, and seeing the strides that they take to get themselves to a certain level. And regardless of how far you go, I mean, there might be a CEO in the audience that or a business owner in the audience that has exceeded $100 million mark. You still have your struggles,
Mm-hmm.
and you still have your origin story. You still, there's still a part of you that comes from that nothing that started this thing at zero. And to me personally, I value that, and that's the piece that I want to continue to take care of, because you didn't just get on top of that mountain. You worked your way to the top of that mountain, and perhaps you're now looking at another summit, and I want to make sure that you're able to reach that.
Above and beyond. I love it. I love it. It's a
Absolutely.
true North Star when you think about engagement and how people interact with you. Last one is operational excellence. I know we didn't touch on too many things, but I did hear throughout our interview, some investments that you made with systems and processes and stuff like that. So tell us kind of that last 30, 60 seconds of, what are some tools that I guess are very particular to your industry that you use?
Yeah, so of course, this year artificial intelligence is a significant component for practically any company, and we're no foreigners to that by any means. Uh, Excuse me. When it comes to conceptualization, when it comes to ideation, of course, there's tons of, like, I mean, you've got Midjourney. There's tons of artificial intelligence powered tools out there for companies to be able to get their clients to go much faster than compared to what it was before. So, like I said, Midjourney happens to be one of them. Chat GPT, everyone's using. That's just become very colloquial at the time, ubiquitous at the time, right? But Claude.ai is another one. 11 Labs voiceovers are another one. I mean, various things that, again, shorten the timeline to production to get your clients out in one capacity or another. That tools that we're leveraging. Otter.ai, my goodness, that has been phenomenal for us, primarily
Hmm.
because that transcribes, that integrates into Zoom and even in live conversations, so that we don't miss something. Again, it's a artificial intelligence powered transcriber, and it'll take conversations. It will separate out uh, separate out various speakers. They'll be able to detect them, and by the end of all of that, it is integrated. Maybe it's integrated into Chat GPT, or maybe it has its own language learning, whatever you want to call that artificial intelligence tool, and you can ask it, give me highlights from this particular conversation.
Hmm.
Give me a recap from this conversation. So I really like that, primarily because we're now able to capture various pieces of the conversation. Hey, we talked about this type of a revenue, break that down into a hockey stick curve, things like that. Again, you can get, again, the biggest rate limiter in artificial intelligence, in my opinion, is still your own creative imagination
Hmm.
and the way that you ask questions. So there's still a human element in terms of what you ask it. And I would say that my ability to give instructions to my employees and to be able to communicate has probably become a bit more refined as a result of prompting artificial intelligence this year, because you have to
Wow.
get very specific, and you
Yeah.
have to again kind of go back and reformulate your questions to be able to get a desired result. And the more and more you do that, you find that, okay, well, maybe that you can cross pollinate, and maybe you take that and sprinkle the same sort of an expectation when it comes to your employees or your clients.
I'm already thinking, man, that's a shorts YouTube Instagram story right there. The last 15 seconds, how
Wow.
how you put that of how people are not using it to that level, right? To actually learn from it and then go back to your employees and use it to be able to be
Sure.
really refined in the way that you're leading them and questioning certain things. So really awesome stuff, always. Super, such a pleasure to have you on. Obviously, like I started the interview, Go for CEO community. I wish you were offline with us because we may do some neat things together. We're talking about some plans that maybe we do some different offshoots of the Go for CEO channel. But excited to have you on. Super, blessed to be able to do this. Every 6 to 12 months, we'd love to have you back on, learn about the tribe that keeps on following you, the growth that you've had at the Visual Q. But for now, what are some ways that people can get a hold of you? What's the preferred communication tools? If there's someone interested, if there's another CEO, founder, entrepreneur that's watching this video and you want to engage with Owais, not only leave a message or leave a comment in some of our posts, but also engage with them. So give them some information of how to connect with you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. And I'll just start from the top. Typically, the companies that work with us are B2B companies that are middle market. They're heading into various stages in their companies that again they need to maintain relevance. So I explained that earlier. And then usually we're talking to C-level execs, someone, and primarily ownership, stakeholders, things of that nature. In terms of getting a hold of me, go to the website, thevisualq.com. That's the visual Charlie Uniform Echo.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Owais CUE is the handle, linkedin.com/Owais, OWAIS dash Charlie Uniform Echo is the way to find me on LinkedIn. What else did you ask? What am I missing here?
No, just the best ways to
That's
connect
it.
with
Best way
you,
to
and
connect with
obviously,
me.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the two best ways to connect with me. And again, yeah, if you are a company owner that is now starting to see that there are I wouldn't even call them various hindrances, but the way that I like to always say is like, look, in order for you to stay competitive over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, in presence of so many changes that are happening in the marketplace, how are you continuing to evolve? And that's what I'm going to help you come in and answer.
Woo! They call me John the Bomb. Building others means business, but that's dropping a bomb right there. So I love it. I love it, Owais. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, Go for Show community, we will have Owais back over the next 6 to 12 months, ensuring that this journey that he's on over the last 10 years and going to go probably 10, 15, 20, 30 years, hopefully, to be able to grow this visual cue and what they're doing in the marketplace. So thanks so much again for coming on.
John, thank you.